Peter King, nice enough to join us for a weekly talk, a day ahead of normal schedule. He's here on a Monday. Michael Irvin will be on Tuesday. But Peter, thank you so much. Obviously, you wrote a magnum opus in your column this week about what you've said is the trade of the year, at least up until now anyways, that the 49ers made for Christian McCaffrey. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the trade, though, I know you paid great attention to the game as it played out, and I'm wondering if you saw the 49ers actually naked, because, boy, they got undressed by the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, that arguably, and look, I've got a partnership this year with Next Gen Stats, which has been in operation since 2016. And basically, they break down all aspects of the game, mostly very technical ones involving speed of players and distance of coverage from receivers. But it's just very, I mean, you've got basically a tracking device in the uniform of every player in the NFL. So you can tell a lot of things. And basically last night, my contact at Next Gen, about 11:30 at night, he texted me and he goes, "I just want you to know that earlier today, I was writing something on Joe Burrow, and they said this is the best game this year by a quarterback in the NFL, Joe Burrow's game." And then it turns out that when all the games were finished yesterday, Next Gen contacted me and said, "By the way, that Patrick Mahomes game is the best game a quarterback, by our rankings, by our metrics, the best game a quarterback has played since we have been dissecting these games." And so part of this whole thing is, a lot of times you don't know whether to tip your hat to the other team or to rip the crap out of your team because of how you played. And clearly the 49ers made enough mistakes in that game. But, my two conclusions after this game is that Patrick Mahomes, Jimmy Garoppolo was not a fair fight, number one. And number two, Patrick Mahomes, after 7 weeks, has gotten exceedingly comfortable. Juju Smith-Schuster, all these new guys, Juju Smith-Schuster, Isaiah Pacheco, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And they now, as Chris Sims said on NBC last night, I never thought I was going to say this, but this team is better without Tyreek Hill than with him.
I mean, that's a big statement that only time, I think, can really, bear out to show that there's some truth there. But the Chiefs really aren't missing a beat. And what was amazing about that game yesterday, Peter, is, you say that the stats say it was the best quarterback game since they've been tracking them. At the same time, I thought that Patrick Mahomes did nothing spectacular all day. Like, all he did was just run the plays that Andy sent in, and they were good enough to destroy the Niners over and over again. 423 yards passing Mahomes, 529 yards of offense, a career day for some guys wearing Chiefs uniforms. And to me, just, we were discussing just a couple weeks ago, how good could this 49ers defense be? Hey, a little bit banged up or not, they gave up 9.1 yards per play yesterday. Like, that's something an off-brand directional school gives up when they go play an SEC team.
It's one of those things at the end of the game, I thought, especially after talking to Kyle Shanahan at length Saturday night, I thought that, getting Christian McCaffrey is simply not going to matter. Because you're not going to win every game 41-35. You're just not going to do that. And look, in the NFL, we tend on Monday to have overreaction Monday. I'm not sure. And I understand what you're saying. Mahomes didn't do anything, pull any rabbits out of his hat. But there's something beautiful about pristine execution and accurate throws in the intermediate and sort of short, deep parts of the field that is exactly what Andy Reid has coached Mahomes to do. So, again, I would not. I mean, if next Monday, if the Rams put up in the 30s against this team, I would be exceedingly worried. But right now, if Buffalo or Kansas City, undresses your defense, I just shrug my shoulders and say, well, A, it's a long season. B, they're the absolute best right now at what they do. C, both of those offenses are very healthy. And, the San Francisco defense right now has some injuries, and who knows, even when Bosa plays, how healthy he is. So I don't look at that as a death knell for this team. But again, if they have a bad day at SoFi on Sunday, that's when I'd be really worried.
This is a broader question than just the 49ers, but I'll frame it starting with them. Even if you allow for the fact that the Giants and Eagles might be better, even though their schedule has been kind to them so far, is this the worst NFC or worst conference you can remember seeing? And if so, in how many years?
Ray, I'd have to look back year by year.
I just make it up.
Or I can make it up. Yes, it's the worst since 2007.
Okay, great.
I don't know. But I think what happens every year is that, like, for instance, this year, the NFC South might be historically bad. The NFC West isn't as good as any of us thought. The NFC North has only one good team, and it seems right now unlikely that the Packers are going to rebound. But, the NFC East looks like it's going to have three playoff teams, and we all want. If you watch the Giants, you say, oh, they'll get their comeuppance. Well, really? Every week in the fourth quarter, they're hanging around. Daniel Jones is playing the best football of his NFL career. Saquon Barkley is very hard to stop. And they have a great, not good, a great defensive front. So I don't think they're a great team by any stretch. But 6-1 is 6-1. And I don't care how weak the schedule has been. This team's making the playoffs, and I'm not saying they're going to be any good or they're going to be trouble for the Vikings or the Eagles or whatever, but they're a pretty good team and extraordinarily fundamentally sound.
Peter King with us here on 95.7 The Game. So would you tell us about that phone call you had Saturday with Kyle Shanahan? And at any point in that phone call, did you bring up with him the point that you just kind of made, saying, McCaffrey is an extraordinary player, but I don't know how much you need him or how much he changes your equation? And if you did bring that up with him, Peter, how did he react to that?
No, because I really think that he's needed. I think that this is an offense that has been relatively stagnant, and that is going to need reinforcements. And so my question about this is not about, and my question to Shanahan was not, well, is this guy good enough? The two questions are, is this guy worth a pick, worth 4 picks from the rounds that you took Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, we can go on. There's 4 or 5. George Kittle, the safety from USC. I'd mispronounce his name because I always do, and I feel
Talanoa Hufanga.
Yeah, Talanoa. But he immediately answered that, and he goes, "Those are great players, but for every great guy we've taken, I can think of 10," and he was exaggerating. I can think of 10 who weren't so great. And you know, I remember this vividly, okay, over the years, talking to Jimmy Johnson. If this trade doesn't work, okay, if it doesn't work for whatever reason, injury, performance, you know, the fact that they don't have enough reinforcements, you know, at important positions, if it doesn't work, I will reflect on the words that Jimmy Johnson told me a long, long time ago about draft choices and about how great he was at work in the draft. And, you know, he once told me that the idea, I'm not much better, if at all, than the other guys who do this. But if I get more picks, I have more chances to get it right. And I'm paraphrasing him, okay? This is 28 years ago. But his whole point was, you know, if you want to play the Powerball tomorrow, and the Powerball is $400 million, do you have a better chance to win the Powerball if you buy one ticket or if you buy 5? Well, you know, we could argue and say it's a fool's errand anyway. You shouldn't do it, blah, 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 which I don't do. I don't play the lottery.
Right, but the correct answer is 5.
Yeah, of course. And anyway, my whole point about this, and Jimmy Johnson's point about this, was a very simple point. The more chances you have, the more chances you have to get it correct. And so all I can say is, you know, John Lynch said on Friday at the press conference, John Lynch said Friday that he was going to have a conversation with all of his scouts to tell them, you know, hey, don't be depressed, don't be whatever. Your work this year is more important than ever because we've lost a lot of those early picks. So we're going to have to make some great picks down the line and all that. And that's fine to tell them. That's fine to tell them. But the greatest scouts in the world understand that it is like hitting on the Powerball when you use the 199th pick in the draft to take Tom Brady. And, you know, the bottom line is the 49ers' biggest risk in this is not, well, are we going to sign him long term? How many years is he going to give us? Is he going to get hurt? The biggest risk is, and again, look, the 5th in 24 does not bother me at all because that's in essence got the value of like a 6. But you now are going to have, let's just say, the 102nd and the 105th pick in the draft in 2023, and those are going to be your only 2 picks in like the first 160 picks. And when you have holes, which every team does every April, that's a pretty big disadvantage to be at.
So, Peter, like, you know, every single animated Bugs Bunny thing, he gets hit on the head, and then all of a sudden you got an angel on one shoulder, you got a demon on the other shoulder. Do you think that Kyle Shanahan basically has that on his shoulders, but instead of it being an angel and a demon, it's Kyle Shanahan, the coach, and Kyle Shanahan, the GM? Because Kyle Shanahan, the GM, seems to be much more aggressive than Kyle Shanahan, the coach, is willing to be.
Well, I think one of the reasons in that is I think you'd feel a lot more comfortable being very aggressive if Mahomes is your quarterback versus having Garoppolo as your quarterback. And so I think that's part of that. But I also think that Kyle Shanahan is looking at modern football. And I wrote a pretty good chunk in the column today about how trading really has changed over the years. You know, when I was young covering this game, the Giants had a very traditional general manager named George Young, who did not like to trade high draft choices. Okay. And then there were other people in the game who did like to. Not many, but like there was Bobby Beathard of Washington, who didn't care at all. He would trade picks all the time. But he was an absolute lone wolf in football. And today, he would not be a lone wolf. You have all of these 40-something GMs, from Brad Holmes in Detroit to Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah in Minnesota to Howie Roseman in Philly. You have, to Thomas Dimitroff when he traded 5 draft picks to go get Julio Jones. And look, you've got all of these guys who, this is not your father's NFL. And these are not your father's general managers. These are guys like Les Snead and Shanahan/Lynch who are going to make trades and who are happy to make trades. And Kyle Shanahan knows that this is a gamble. He may look back in 2 years and say, I wish we didn't do this. But as he said really, it'd be a gamble to not do it too. Because if we were sitting there at the end of this year and we didn't perform well and either we're out of the playoffs or whatever, and we hadn't made the trade, we'd be kicking ourselves for not making the trade. And so I really think it's a difficult one. I think you could come down on either side of this issue right now, quite honestly. And Shanahan made no bones about it. He was not crowing. He never said to his team afterwards, we have the missing piece. He just said, hey, we're a better team, but it's not going to matter unless we play better.
When you look at Kyle Shanahan, the general manager, as opposed to Kyle Shanahan, the coach, do you see the same kind of dichotomy I do that you have in the coach, a guy who likes games to be played relatively close to the vest, win with defense and clock management, and a general manager who's willing to hit on 17 whenever the mood strikes him?
But Ray, I think that way oversimplifies this.
Probably does, but
think about this. Think about this. Would you be putting your guts on the table, to put it nicely? And would you be making huge gambles and wagers, okay, with Jimmy Garoppolo versus Patrick Mahomes? And look, I am not in any way saying that everybody's got a Mahomes. You don't. And there aren't many of those, really. There's very, very few really great quarterbacks. But Kyle Shanahan can't coach these games like Andy Reid does. He just can't. So to play in a way that you think is best to help your team win right now, I understand the way he's calling these games and playing these games. And don't you think that part of the reason that he got Christian McCaffrey is there were 2 consecutive plays yesterday that McCaffrey touched the ball. One was a 9-yard run, and one was about a 13-yard pass that Garoppolo just threw it to him in the open field, and they were going to let McCaffrey make out of it whatever he could. And I think he made whatever he made, 12, 13, 14 yards. But my point is that is why they got Christian McCaffrey, because it's not altogether easy for the 49ers to make 9 and 11 yards the way it is for other teams with really great quarterbacks to make 9, 10, and 12-yard gains all the time.
Peter, Nick Bosa has obviously enjoyed almost a criticism-free career. He is pretty much, a dominant presence in all games that he has appeared in so far in his career. But yesterday, I thought that Andy Reid used his aggression against him, and then D'Amico, Kyle, wherever you want to place the blame, did nothing to say, hey, look, you just can't go full bore after Patrick Mahomes because the entire Chiefs game plan is being put right at the edge that you're vacating. They ran plays to the spot Nick Bosa vacated all afternoon long, and it didn't seem like there was any adjustment to that. And you had Nick Bosa line up offsides on 2 straight plays. Maybe it was just by his fingernails, but I don't think I've ever seen that happen 2 plays in a row.
Here's the thing with Bosa. I think that game is a tremendous educational. That game should be a tremendous educational process for Bosa, because games are different. They just are. And if you play Matt Ryan, all right, you can go full bore at the quarterback because he's not going to be able to escape you. Whereas Patrick Mahomes wants you to come full bore. Have you ever seen, and of course you have, the stats about that there's a good chance this is one of the great players in NFL history against the blitz. He might end up going down in history as the greatest player against the blitz. And I just don't think you can go at Patrick Mahomes willy-nilly. Now, you also can't go ultra conservative either. But I just don't think they played Patrick Mahomes very smart on their pass rush.
Is that the sort of thing that teams tend to do when they only see Mahomes once every 3 or 4 years? Or is that just sort of standard that nobody really knows how good he or they are until they get hit in the face with him?
Well, if I said the latter, then you would say, well, that's not a very smart team then, is it? And I know DeMeco Ryans is smart. I know Bosa is smart. And obviously, Kyle Shanahan is smart. But I guess what I would say is that, although you don't play them all the time, how can you not know and how can you not respect the numbers out there? And I just don't think there was a lot of... Look, there's a good chance that Patrick Mahomes is going to succeed however you play him. But I do think that there was a little bit of recklessness. That's probably the wrong word. I wouldn't say recklessness. But I just don't think they played him very smart.
The most points given up at home in the Kyle Shanahan era, 44 yesterday. The 49ers had 30 points put on them in the second half alone. Again, the Chiefs outscored the 49ers 44-13 after Kyle had his 10-point lead, which, again, evaporated. The Chiefs will certainly do that. Peter, I agree with what you were saying about how, forget about the point total that the Rams might put up next week. They just got to beat the Rams. They got to go into the bye week at 4-4. And they got to have those games in hand in their division because...
You know why they have to beat the Rams? I'll tell you why. Seattle's better than anybody thinks.
Yes, they are. That's kind of where I was going. Look at the Seahawks.
And, I don't say this because the lead of my column today was about Geno Smith and all that. But I say that because look at their young talent. And, it was fashionable before this year to say, well, this is going to be a long rebuild for the Seahawks and good for them for getting all those picks and all that. But the reason it's not a long rebuild is that John Schneider had one of the best drafts anybody's had in a long time. And you start with the running back, Kenneth Walker, and they gambled right on the quarterback. So to me, that this game is really, really important. They have to flush the Chiefs game. They just have to flush it. And they have to look at this game like this is the most important game this season. And I don't want to overstate it because if they lose, they're still going to have a chance. But I don't know. I think that some of the games that you need to win, you need to win the games against teams that are down. And look, there's tremendous talent on the Rams. Tremendous talent. But they have some holes right now. And that offensive line, this is the game. where Bosa has got to put Stafford in his sights. This is the game where he's got to run like a banshee, And so I think you're absolutely right. This game is a vitally important game for the 49ers.
Peter, thank you so much. Thanks for flipping your schedule around to accommodate us today. We always appreciate your time.
No problem, guys. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you very, very much. Peter King here on 95.7 The Game.